So we have an amazing speaker and your MC from yesterday, Kat Cosgrove, and she's going to talk to us about maintenance and trust and how it's not just for software, because it turns out that if you want your island to be awesome, you need people to work together. So go ahead and take it away, Kat.
Hello. Woo, good morning. I put little Animal Crossing characters on all of these slides, and some of them are my favorites. Some of them are the ones that I am the most terrified of. And some of them I just thought were cute. In particular, Coco, I think, is, she looks like a sleep paralysis demon. And I love her. I love her, even though she's horrifying. So good morning. Welcome to day 2 of Deserted Island DevOps. And today I'm going to be talking about community maintenance. And it's not that much different than software maintenance, as it turns out. But before I get into it, I want to express how excited I am to be here. I spoke at the first of these 3 years ago, super early on in the pandemic. And at the time, I was pretty much unknown as a speaker. Nobody really knew who I was. I was very much just starting out. And it's kind of weird to think about how little things have changed since then. In some ways, things have changed a lot. In others, like really not at all. The isolation of a pandemic, it turns out, can make it feel like time kind of compresses, like it hasn't really passed. It doesn't feel like I'm 32. It still feels like I'm 29, for instance. But it has, in fact, been years. A huge chunk of my career has been spent alone in person. But thanks to tech communities and online communities in general, I wasn't really alone. I had an advantage in having grown up on the internet, and terminally online. So making friends online is not hard for me, but I want to recognize that it is hard for a lot of people. So while I didn't feel super alone, a lot of people have, and we've all done a great job making it this far. So good job, everybody. Let's go. First, my name is Kat Cosgrove, and I am a developer advocate. For those of you watching online who don't know what that is, there are several developer advocates in the room with me, though. That means that a lot of my time at work is spent in technical communities, both for whoever's employing me and for whatever projects I enjoy supporting just because I like the project or I like the people. I'm around in a few, but the overwhelming majority of my time gets spent in the Kubernetes community. I've been on the release team for the last few releases, and I'm a CNCF ambassador. As a developer advocate, a lot of my job is also justifying the value of community to businesses. Some of you might find it obvious, the value that a community has to a business, but I promise you it's not, and any developer advocate or head of community will tell you the same, because this is an argument we have over and over and over and over and over again with our bosses and the marketing department and finance. It is constant. I've also been a cosplayer for years, and I'm very into makeup. And when I say very into makeup, I don't just mean I wear a lot of it, I mean I collect it. It's a whole thing. It is a hobby. And if you aren't into either of those things, you might not realize it, but our tech communities are not too terribly different from a community that pops up around like a cosmetics brand or whatever. Before I go too far, I have left time at the end for questions. But if I can't get to you, or if you've got something you want to ask that you're not super comfortable with everybody on the stream and everybody in this room hearing, you can DM me on Twitter at Dixie3Flatline, and I will get to you ASAP. Go to the next slide, you. There we go. So what's a community? Every company, brand, and project on the planet wants to have some kind of community around it. That can be a community of employees acting as external advocates, like when you see companies from Coca-Cola to Nike use employees in their marketing copy and like magazines or on their website. That's very much a thing. Sometimes those are hired actors, but a lot of the time they really are employees of the company being used as a brand ambassador functionally. Lush, a bath products brand, they like to put the name and picture of the employee who made that particular batch of product on the packaging. That's still marketing. That's still like using an employee as a brand ambassador, a community member. It can also be a community of customers, like you often see with everything from cosmetics brands to video games to software. It's probably the community you're more familiar with. These types of communities are desirable for a lot of reasons, but they do not just pop up out of nowhere. You don't get this for free. It is hard work to build one of these, and every benefit you get out of them comes with a pitfall if you don't maintain the relationship correctly and establish trust on both sides. Build a healthy community and take care of it, and you get a lot out of it. So first, let's take a look at what any company, regardless of what vertical they exist in, gets out of their community. The most obvious of these and why people want them so bad is word of mouth promotion. A healthy, active community gets you free advertising from the most trustworthy advocates you have. Real users, spreading the word because they genuinely like your thing. It's much more authentic. People trust this immediately. It can backfire, though, if you don't take care of it, if you don't maintain the relationship. A misstep with a product or with a policy decision will spread fast, and it can damage or outright destroy your reputation. We see this a lot, over and over and over again, from startups to enterprises to random hobby drama. There's a subreddit called Hobby Drama. You would not believe how ridiculous some of the drama gets over like a particular yarn company. Like, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's not just like companies like Coinbase getting dragged on Twitter because of their like weird policy about not allowing their employees to talk about politics. Like, some of the drama in communities that gets started by the company can get really petty, and that doesn't make it any less dangerous, right? But this is actually an inevitability. You are going to make a mistake that upsets your community. You're gonna step in shit eventually. You know, people make mistakes. We are just all human, and it's your response to that that determines whether things get better or worse. This isn't a thing it's possible to provide like really generic advice on. It super depends on what went wrong and how the community reacted. So I'll just say this: when it happens, because it's gonna happen, do not try to handle it yourself. Definitely don't let the person who made the mistake in the first place bear all of the responsibility for fixing it. And certainly, you see this all the time, certainly do not double down on whatever mistake has angered your community. I feel like that shouldn't be advice that has to be given, but it is just a thing that we see repeatedly, and I think I know why, and I'll talk about it in a couple of slides. You may also want to consider, like, I don't know, hiring a crisis PR firm or something and doing what they say. So we also get free content. This is anything from blog articles to videos to reviews to conference talks, whatever. It's also a sort of word of mouth promotion, although it's less personal. If you need to keep up a regular cadence on a corporate blog and you don't have the bandwidth to be writing 3 articles a week, ask the authors of community-generated content if you can repost their blog with author credit. They're gonna like that. They like that. That is maintaining your community. It's beneficial to you too, because, you know, you don't have to write a blog article that week. You get it from somebody else, but it makes them feel good. It makes them feel seen. It makes them feel like they contributed something. It makes them feel useful. And IMO, you should also offer them something in return for saying yes, just as an extra bit of goodwill. Send them a t-shirt, you know, anything. You also get product feedback. Knowing what your community of users and potential users actually want is really important, or you're not going to be able to convince them effectively to use your thing or hopefully give you money. You can pay for market research, of course, and probably this is a thing that you want to do at some point, but you can also get it from the users you already have if you nurture the relationship and make it known that you really do act on community feedback. This one is very easy to screw up in a couple of ways. If you collect community product feedback and you never act on it, your community will eventually feel that you just are not listening. and that you do not care at all. And it's a very understandable assumption. By asking your community to do that free work for you, to write good, solid product feedback, and then just like doing nothing with it, you may as well be directly telling them that you don't care, right? That you're just paying lip service. You just want the appearance of caring. And that's dangerous. Do not do that. Don't take, or especially don't solicit product feedback if you have no intent of actually using it. You have to respect the work it takes for somebody to do that for you for free. If a significant portion of your users are asking for something, no matter how much you disagree, you need to consider that you might be the one who's wrong. Who are you building this for? Is it for you, or is it for the users? It's also really important to keep your ego in check here. This is the second way I see this go wrong. You have to keep your feelings out of the equation. I know this project or this startup or this whatever is your baby, okay? I know you've poured your heart and soul and savings into this thing, but much like a real baby, they're kind of weird looking, okay? They're kind of weird looking. I have never seen a perfect baby, and I have never seen a perfect open source project or a perfect startup. There's always something like a little bit weird that other people can see, but you can't because you're its parent, right? You can't take it personally when users don't think that your baby is as perfect as you think it is. You see this a lot with everything from startup founders to like early employees of mid-sized companies to enterprises, somebody who's been involved for a very long time or since the beginning gets emotional. And nobody is immune to their emotions, right? You're gonna feel them, but you can't act on them. So if somebody criticizes an aspect of your product, even if they're a little rude, you cannot respond by lashing out or getting snarky or outright telling them they're wrong unless what they're saying in public is like actively dangerous, like it's actively detrimental. If they're just a little bit wrong or you just don't like their opinion, you can't do that, because not only does it ruin your product for a user who might otherwise have great suggestions, even if they're not super good at phrasing it, it makes you and the company look bad for absolutely everybody who sees that interaction on Twitter. It just does. You simply can't do that. If you can't handle it, that's okay. That's okay. You just have to acknowledge it, and you hire somebody who can. Developer advocates are actually particularly good at this. Not getting so emotionally invested that we take product feedback personally is part of what you pay us for, actually. Now, product support does not work as well until you have a sizable community. This isn't something that just like comes out of nowhere. But past that point, if you equip your community well from the start, they can and will start supporting each other's use of the product. This does not mean like serious issues like bugs or something, though it can assist with like finding bugs and then reporting them. But it's for questions like, how do I do X with Y? Think questions that are too specific for someone's use case to justify an entire tutorial, but that's still good to have in an indexable place. And when I say equip your community well from the start, I do not mean setting up a community Slack and then just letting them have at it, okay? First of all, Slack is not very good for this. It actually sucks for this. It is not a community tool. It is a like asynchronous work collaboration tool. And unless you're paying for Slack, it doesn't store history forever, okay? So old questions like how do I do X with Y, they disappear and people can't search for them. That kind of sucks, and paying for Slack can get so expensive. Relying solely on Slack also requires users to make an account just to find out if someone has already answered their question, which is a bit of unnecessary friction, IMO. This is a better situation for a forum, for something like Discourse or whatever. Second of all, you still need employees in there. You really cannot just leave your community entirely alone here, which you'll notice is a pattern. You cannot just like leave the community alone. The employees have to be in there. They have to be visibly in there, interacting with people, answering questions if another user can't do it, but you know, giving the community a chance to take care of themselves. And another problem you see a lot in community areas like this is Again, you can't get your emotions involved. If someone's struggling and they're getting a little bit frustrated, that's going to show in their choice of words, right? They might get a little bit snippy, okay? But you have to, once again, resist the temptation to get frustrated right back at them. You've got to dial it back, because the rest of the community is going to watch how you interact with this person. And if they see you treating somebody who, to their eyes, is having trouble and getting frustrated, and you're treating them badly for that, they're going to think twice about you. Communities are still about trust, and it is a relationship that requires maintenance and grace. Cannot just wing it. This one probably requires an NDA. You may also see this called like ambassador programs. That is kind of, ambassador programs are functioning in part as a sort of focus group. And a lot of them do require that you sign NDAs. The CNCF does not have us sign NDAs, but all of the other ambassador programs I'm in, like for Oracle or JFrog, they required NDAs. And that's not uncommon at all, because you get a lot of pre-launch information about features or events that you just like have to keep quiet about. But if you have some community members who are consistently active and insightful, you reward that behavior by bringing them in a little bit more, right? Give them pre-release access to new features. Give them a direct line to product or engineering so they really feel heard. Take the feedback that they give you very, very seriously, though. Like really seriously. These are your most passionate users. They're also likely way more in touch with the wants and needs of your community than you are, simply because they get to spend more time in it. And the temptation is to think, well, I built the thing, so I, of course, know what the community is doing better than this random person who didn't build the thing. But having built the thing gives you a sort of like tunnel vision where it can be hard to see anything other than what you want to see, which ties a little bit back into not really listening to community product feedback because you think you know better than your own users. Before I go further on this one, I need to say something about influencers. The use of the word influencer is extremely loaded these days. People tend to use this word disparagingly, and I think that sucks. With the rise of Instagram and YouTube, influencer marketing became a big thing. And really, this is just like word of mouth promotion, really. It's like the more grassroots version of hiring a celebrity spokesperson, right? And so you identify like a particularly prominent person in a community you want to target or in your own community, and somebody that's got like a lot of Twitter followers, a lot of YouTube subscribers or whatever, and then you offer them incentives to talk about your product to their following, whether it's a YouTube video or some tweets or whatever. And the idea here is that because it's coming from an individual not employed by your company, it's viewed as more authentic. And for a long time, this worked extremely well, especially in the beauty industry, which is where it that's probably what most of you think about when you think about influencers. You think about YouTube beauty gurus or girls on Instagram, right? It got overused badly because of that, and it bred a level of distrust in influencers across industries, with a lot of people now questioning the endorsement of any product by any individual with a large enough follower count, right? Whether they're actually being paid to talk about the product or not is irrelevant. People will just say, oh, they're just an influencer. And I suspect that the use of the word influencer as a pejorative in tech communities is rooted in sexism, and I don't like hearing it. Since influencer marketing rose to prominence in makeup communities heavily dominated by femme people, and oh, they're just an influencer is almost always leveled at femme people, it feels real sexist to me. So if you are currently using that word as an insult, I would ask that you examine why you are doing that and what you think of when you hear the word influencer, and then stop doing that, please, because it sucks and I don't like hearing it. All that said, you absolutely can still use influencer marketing. I picked this photo just because I thought it was cute. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying. It's just that I'm like really proud of my island, and I think that's, and now you all have to look at it. You can still use influencer marketing. You just have to do it differently now. You have to think about the community when you do it. You can't just pay somebody who's popular with your community to make a video about your product or toss out a few tweets. That does not work. It's inauthentic, and people can tell. You have to do for their community, the influencers community, as you would do to your own. You give them something of value to them, something that they find valuable, not something that you find valuable. So work with the influencer to find out what their community is like and build content specifically targeted at them. For us, that probably means an in-depth tutorial or a co-presented interview covering topics and use cases that are specifically relevant to the audience that that influencer talks to. That does not mean a pitch deck full of marketing buzzwords that might fit better as a sponsored interstitial at a tech conference. That's what those are for. And all of this is true whether you make cosmetics or sunglasses or cars or software. But in open source, we have another issue we have to consider. In open source, your community is also partially responsible for building and maintaining your products. The stakes are higher. Some of these products would not exist without open source maintainers. A lot of them wouldn't exist without open source maintainers. Yes, even if the product that you are selling is closed source, unless you're using forks of all of your dependencies and maintaining those forks yourself, and you're probably not doing that. Without the community, your product straight up might not exist. Really might not. Or at least not without you hiring a bunch more engineers, and you probably don't want to do that because of the economy. Although you rely on these engineers, I thought this was the most imposing villager to use for open source maintainers aren't your employees. She's really like staring into your soul there, you know? So although you rely on these engineers, whether they're directly working on your open source tool or they're upstream maintainers, it's important to remember that they are not your employees, okay? You don't pay them, and that means you can't treat them like you pay them. A lot of these maintainers are working in their free time because they genuinely want to support and participate in this community. They aren't doing it because they love building your paid product for free, right? And they don't have to do it, okay? They can leave. It is very possible for you to run off your maintainers. It's maybe even easy to run off your maintainers if you treat them badly, if you don't maintain the relationship properly. We've seen it happen before. We're going to see it happen again. There was just a big exodus out of the Rust community, and it happens. It's going to keep happening, but you don't need to be an example that somebody uses in a conference talk a couple years from now. So how do you maintain the maintainers? You got to act like a member of the community yourself, and you get to decide what kind of community member you are going to be. Are you going to be Tom Nook, or are you going to be Pietro, who is a perfect angel baby, and I will not hear otherwise? Look at him. God, he's cute. When I say you can't treat maintainers like a team of engineers you actually pay, I mean you can't demand work, and you can't tell the maintainers what to do. Remember, they are, once again, doing this for free. You got a feature launch that relies on something making it into another open source project? You should not just be opening an issue or a feature request and expecting them to do the work for you, especially if this is a feature that really only benefits you. That's rude. You see it all the time. I'm so tired of seeing those feature requests. It sucks. I see it from medium-sized companies, big companies, little companies. People love trying to fleece the open source community for free features. Please don't. Ideally, build out the feature yourself and open a PR. Make sure you follow the project's existing processes and guidelines for doing that, but just do the work yourself. Do the work yourself. I know PR's welcome is open source snark for take your criticism and put it where the sun don't shine, but it's also actually true, just open the PR. The PRs are actually welcome. We say PRs welcome because we think that you're not actually going to do it, right? So, but, surprise us, do it, open the PR. If that PR really only benefits you though, and especially if it is significant enough to impact other users or other teams in some way, you need to prepare for a reality in which maintainers decline to merge your PR, even if you've done all the work. I have also seen that happen, and it is what it is. Like, this is one of the things that happens when you rely on free open source work to build your product. The maintainers have a vision of where that project should go to, and you have to respect that you don't actually have any control there. They get to make decisions about their project. If you're a particularly large organization, like you have money, you may want to go a step further here and actually help them out. Support the project by sponsorship, like financial sponsorship. That is a thing for a lot of projects. Or dedicate your own engineering time to contributing to upstream projects, either full or part-time. You know, you can hire an engineer whose literal only job is to participate upstream. Or you incentivize your existing employees to spend a couple hours of engineering time a week contributing upstream on their paid time, not on their free time, on their paid time. Okay? It's important to remember that, like, some degree of autonomy with respect to governance, procedures, and features is required for these communities to thrive and for them to trust you. Even if it's your own open source community, you have to give them some amount of autonomy. You have to trust them to make some of their own decisions. Otherwise, you're just treating them like employees that you don't pay, and they will simply leave, because what's keeping them there? And now, inevitably, you are going to run into some conflict. This is not avoidable at all. People are messy. It is strictly a matter of when, not if. Go ahead and accept that. It's going to happen. Communication styles are different, and that can cause conflict. The will of the community might not align with the needs of the business, and that can cause conflict. It really is not avoidable. And the likelihood of this happening grows with your community. At a certain point, a community does develop like a personality of its own, a vibe, if you will. And the community vibe may not mesh well with the corporate vibe. It happens, or your personal vibe. And it's okay. That's okay. You can still get along. What matters is how you handle the conflict as it's happening and what you do afterwards to repair the trust. So when a conflict occurs between you and the community, it is important to remember first and foremost that you can just talk to each other. You can just have a conversation about that. It does not have to turn into a big, messy thing. This is another situation where you have to remove your emotions from the equation. The community might be mad, and you as an individual, you might be hurt, but consider that your replies come with the weight of a company behind it, okay? There is a power differential there, an extreme one, and it is on you to be sensitive to that every single time. If it's appropriate for the issue at hand, try taking the problem out of the public space, maybe with a mediator that is friendly to both parties, and have a discussion. Find the path to a peaceful resolution. Something went wrong that upset that community member or that group of community members and created conflict. There is a way to resolve that. It doesn't have to just be a whole bunch of people getting mad on socials all the time and making it worse. In most situations, that path does exist, but you're never going to find it if you don't just talk to each other. Because even if you have two very different perspectives, you and the community do actually want the same thing. You want to see the project thrive. You just maybe have different ideas of how it gets there, right? They want more features out of it. They want better support. They want more stability. And you probably want more money because you're a business and that's what businesses do, right? The community and the business may disagree on how to achieve that. But if you want all the benefits of having a big community, you have to consider their opinion. You have to consider their feelings. You have to consider the vibe, right? And I mean, like, really consider it and use it to make decisions, not simply like pay lip service. You can't just listen to them and go, oh, well, you know, we'll take that into advisement. We'll take that into advisement is the corporate version of PR's welcome, okay? It's like, really, it is. Of course, like, you don't let the community make all of your decisions. You're still a business. You still have the final say, but the ones that impact them specifically should require their input. Once again, this is open source, not closed source. Your maintainers can just leave if you are ignoring their opinions. They can, and they super will. So, a conflict has occurred. Maybe it was public, maybe it wasn't. You've talked it out, you found some common ground to move forward, but you still damaged the trust there, right? On both sides, right? Both of you have trust issues now. And bruises take a while to fade. They're sore the whole time. You keep poking them, like, you know, when you get a cut on the roof of your mouth and you can't stop tonguing it? It's one of those. So some nurturing is required to ease the way, and that means some concessions being made, usually on part of everybody involved, but especially the people in power, which means the company. Every single member of a community is valuable, and any of them has the ability to take people with them when they leave. So you really do need to put in the effort to repair that damaged trust and maintain that relationship. And it's not that the community is holding you hostage here, it's that their trust in you has been damaged by this conflict, right? Because as a company, you're inherently the one with power. That means you have to work to repair that trust by taking real actions. You can't just say stuff. You can't just make a public statement. You can't just, I don't know, hug it out, so to speak. Remember, we all want this thing to succeed. So the way to solve this is to take real actions that are beneficial for the community at large, for the project at large, and for, you know, just the mental health of everybody involved. It doesn't mean like bribing the one person that got upset. It means making a decision that is better for the whole community and doing it in public. Do it an action, not just words. What that action is depends on what went wrong, but there does have to be an actual action to repair damage. If you do this, it will speed the recovery of your relationship with that one person, with every member of the community that saw whatever drama it was go down, and it reinforces to the rest of the community that you can be trusted, that you are capable of seeing that a mistake was made, and you're willing to do what it takes to repair the damage and grow the community and maintain that relationship. We are all people here. Everybody makes mistakes, and even angry community members realize that. Now, you got to keep doing all of that, unfortunately. Like constantly, none of this is one-time advice. Just like software, a healthy community requires constant maintenance. You can't just disappear and come back when there's a problem, okay? Animal Crossing is a video game. Your villagers will forgive you. 2 seconds later, Muffy did not care that I had been gone for 1 year and 6 months. Right? She didn't care. She didn't care. She didn't notice. And I went and talked to all of my villagers for these screenshots, and she was like the cutest. And she was the only one that like specifically called out how long it had been since I'd logged into Animal Crossing. So she's the one that makes it in. But my villagers will forgive me. Your villagers will forgive you. Your community super might not. If you disappear and you only show up when there's a problem, if you are not like constantly and consistently an active member in your own communities, which includes upstream projects that your product relies on, it's not going to thrive. It simply is not. If you want the benefits I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, the product feedback, the free word of mouth promos, the community support, you have to be proactive. You cannot be reactive. Every time you just wait until an inevitable conflict shows up, you gradually erode trust and you lose the community you worked so hard to build. So constant maintenance, just like with software. Y'all, if you only patch your software when there is a nasty vulnerability, when you get exploited, yikes, you know? Thank you for listening to me ramble for a period of time. I'm not sure how long I went for. These are my two favorite.
Thank you for that.
Welcome.
I would say it definitely was less than 1 year and 6 months that you rambled for.
Thank you.
But
I try not to ramble for 1 year and 6 months.
amazing talk. Definitely great to hear ways that we can really be making sure to be proactive about building trust and making sure that other people don't do actions that make you lose that trust that you've worked so hard to do. Because once you break that trust, as we know, it's hard to come back from it. Like, folks are just going to walk away, and you're not going to be willing to give it another chance. So let's be proactive about it and talk about it.
So I had a question when I was listening to this. Like, this is great general advice, but could you give us a lightly scrubbed example of this happening?
Ooh, a lightly scrubbed example of this happening.
You don't have to call out the actual community, but I know that as a as a CNCF
ambassador,
you've seen that happen.
Yeah. So yes. Yes. Okay. So once upon a time, actually, I can give a specific example actually of, and use names, because this shouldn't be dramatic. So in the CNCF community, we have a thing called Kubernetes Days, right? KCDs, and these are community-run events similar to DevOps Days, but they do have some rules handed down from the CNCF that they have to abide by. And maybe 6 months or so ago, KCD Berlin released a speaker lineup that was straight dudes, just straight dudes. And predictably, the CNCF ambassadors and the community at large freaked out, because we have a higher standard than that in the CNCF and in the Kubernetes community. And for things like KubeCon or the OSS Summit or whatever, or other big Linux Foundation events, it is against the rules to put together a lineup that is straight dudes or straight white people. You can't do it. So we all thought, surely KCD has a similar rule, and they just flagrantly violated it, right? So we all freaked out, and it turns out that somehow there was no such rule. They actually had not violated the rules, and the way the CNCF responded to that was to immediately apologize, which was absolutely the correct thing to do. They don't actually even have any control over KCDs, so they didn't have to apologize in this situation, from my perspective, and it's great that they did. But they immediately apologized. They got in touch with the organizers. They made alternate arrangements. They fixed the speaker lineup on very short notice, which is hard to do in a pandemic, right? And then they changed the rules. They made sure that this can't happen again. They took a material action to change the rules to make sure that that could not happen again, which it was the right move. They didn't have to get publicly involved. They could have handled that all behind closed doors, but the community was real upset. The community was real upset in public, and they utilized the resources they had, which was the ambassador program, to pull some of those speakers that are not white dudes and spread the word that we were fixing this situation. So it was messy, but it got resolved in possibly the cleanest way possible for the situation. It was unfortunate that it happened at all, but it can't happen again now, so that's great.
That seems really it's just useful to have that concrete thing. So we have a couple questions from the audience in Discord. Thank y'all. Do you want to read the first one?
Yeah, definitely. So we have folks asking, they don't know much about open source communities, but it seems very much related to regular volunteer work and thus volunteer management. Is that a field where information is shared with or taken out of?
It is absolutely a lot like volunteer work. Honestly, as a member of the Kubernetes release team, most of what I do is project management. And it's not really necessary to be an engineer, even to be a good project manager on the release team. So it is there is a lot of skills transfer there. It is just volunteering, but for software instead of for cleaning up the park.
It's very true. It's some folks are like, oh, I can't contribute to a technology community, open source community, but there's so many different ways.
You totally can. You don't have to be writing code. That's entirely unnecessary. You can write documentation, you can take on a program management type of role. All of that stuff is just as valuable. We still need that stuff to get the thing shipped too. We can't just have sweet code. That's not enough to actually build a project. That's enough to put something on GitHub, but
nobody cares.
Nobody cares, right? Yeah, you need everybody else involved too. Lots of non-code ways to contribute to open source.
So the next question is, do you find that activities like retrospectives help with trust?
Yes, as long as they're blameless. Do a blameless retro, especially if something really nasty happens. There needs to be a postmortem, and that postmortem should probably be public. It's open source, so I really don't like it when things happen behind closed doors or in private channels in open source. I think it's like antithetical to the concept. So if you have a retro, yes, you should have a blameless retro. You should have a postmortem, and it should exist somewhere in public. Like, honestly, there should probably be like a GitHub repo within your project's org for stuff like that, or I don't know, a blog post, depending on how public it got.
Sure. It's better to be transparent. It's like we talk about trust yesterday and today, where it's like you want to be able to say like, I learned from this, and this is where I'm at now.
Yeah, everything should be public if possible in open source from my perspective. I don't like hiding stuff behind the curtain. It's weird.
Smells fishy.
Yeah.
Gotta dig it out.
Seems sus. Oh, wrong game.
One of the other questions that we have coming in, this may be in contrast to the perspective of the talk, but just as the member of a community, when we get involved in open source work with brands, projects, or ideas that we love, how should we deal with situations where companies aren't following the guidelines that they're talking about, or they aren't listening to the community or their feedback? Is it better to just leave that situation, or do you just stick out for the project that you love?
That depends on your personal tolerance for putting up with other people's crap. I would say that the answer lies in prioritizing your own mental health there. So if you can tolerate it without it tearing you up, if you can tolerate it without like finishing for the day and immediately going to sit on your couch like pissed off in a huff, then, put up with it for a while. But if it starts to negatively impact your mental health, if it starts seeping into your personal life emotionally in any way, dip, vote with your feet. You can just leave. You can just leave. And, I'm a little petty. So in that situation, if it was starting to feel like it was getting abusive on the part of the company, I would leave and slam the door on the way out, yelling the whole time. I would not be quiet about it, but that's me. Not everybody is down for that much conflict. I extremely am. But it's up to your personal tolerance. Prioritize your mental health for the answer there.
That's great advice.
Yeah. So this came up earlier, but say you goofed and someone is very upset. How do you get a mediator so that everyone involved feels safe? Is it like mutual friends, or there are professional mediators that do this sort of thing? How do you invoke that kind of help?
I would go for a mutual friend, and also whether or not you can pull that off depends exactly on what you did, right? If what you did to upset somebody else made them feel actively unsafe in some way, you don't reach out at all. You don't. You let that friendship die. You let that professional relationship die. If you have actually made them feel unsafe, nope. But if it's a professional conflict or a technical conflict that for some reason got messy and emotional, you go for a mutual friend who you know to be very emotionally stable isn't the right word for it, but compassionate, empathetic. They're not going to immediately take one side or the other, and reach out to them, talk to them about the situation, try to be as neutral as possible yourself, and see if they're willing to go to them and find out if they can come to the table for a neutral discussion with that mutual friend at the table, specifically to shut it down when things get too heated. It needs to be somebody that both of you trust, though. Using an external mediator, like a paid mediator, that always feels way too official to me, and it feels hostile. It feels hostile. A professional mediator might be better at it, but for a conflict between a company and an individual, that feels hostile.
Yeah, it sort of reiterates the power differential.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So we have a couple other questions, but I think most of them would be better answered in chat. So thank you again so much, Kat. That was great. And we're going to take So thank you, Kat. Everybody clap.
Woo!